Today's daf Be'ezras Hashem is daf Lamed Gimel, number 33. And we're going to start from daf Lamed Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. So here the Gemara is talking like this. Amar Shmuel, ha'hochil tarpus asur losses behem. Goyim that are going to their pilgrimage and going to serve their idol, so you're not allowed to do business with them. And that we've seen this theme again in the beginning of the Masechta, because if you do business with them and they're successful in their business, they'll go as soon as they get to their destination, they will give a haidah to their avodah zarah, and therefore you'll be over an avera. You'll be over an avera of v'shem elihim acherim lo yisham al picha. Hold on a second. Hi, Lewis and Sheldon, we just began.
Okay, thank you.
So we're on Lamed Beis. And Mishnah says that if the Goyim are going to their pilgrimage for Avodah Zarah, a Jew is not allowed to do business with them, because if the Goy is going to be successful in the business deal, he's going to run to the Avodah Zarah. When he gets to his destination, he's going to give a thanks and gratitude to the Avodah Zarah, and you're causing him to mention in praise the name of his Avodah Zarah. So now the Gemara is going to say it's a very interesting thing. What happens if you have a Jew that converted? So listen to this. Amar Shmuel said, Goy ha'hoylech letarpus, a goy that goes to the pilgrimage. B'halicha aser. You're not allowed to do business with him on his way to the pilgrimage. Why? Because if he's successful, the ozil umoide kamed avodah zarah, he's going to go and give thanks in front of his avodah zarah how he was just successful in business. Bechazara, but let's say he's on his way back from the pilgrimage. Maida if he's successful in business, he's not going to return back and go back to the avodah zarah and give thanks. He's on his way home, so there's no problem doing business with him on his return. But how? Look at the nature. Yisrael, a Jewish guy who converted to another religion. He's on his way to the pilgrimage. Bahalicha mutar, on the way going there, he is permitted. Why? Because you're permitted to do business with this Jew. Why? Because he's not for sure going to end up at the destination. Maybe he's going to have regret and never end up going to the avodah zarah. So you could do business with the Yid who is amongst this pilgrimage. Bechazara, but on the way back, aser. You're not allowed to do business. Whereas a goy returns, it's permitted to do business with the goy. A Yid who just served avodah zarah, you'll be also to do business. And here's the interesting thing. Why? Because a Jew, once they get attached to something, they go all the way. Kevam, we go to Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph. The Avik Ba, since he's addicted to the avodah zarah, he's connected, he's bound to the avodah zarah. So if he's successful in business, Mihada Hada Azo, he's going to return back to the avodah zarah and give another thanks. So even upon his return, you're not allowed to do business with him. Says the Gemara, Vatanya, we learned in a Brisa, Yisrael ha'hoylech tarpus bein ba'alich and bein bechazara asar. A Yid that it's on his way to the avodah zarah. So whether he's on his way towards the avodah zarah or bein bechazara, he's on his return from the avodah zarah, also you're not allowed to do business with him. And you said on the way to the avodah zarah, you are permitted to do business with him. And says the Gemara, Amar Ravashi said, Ki Tanyahi, that Bryce is talking about B'Yisrael Meshuman, a Yid that converted long before. So we know he gave up on his Yiddishkeit. The Vadai Azal, he's for sure going to go to his avodah zarah. So a Yid that's already a converted, he's converted. So then, whether on his way to the avodah zarah or his return from the avodah zarah, you're also to do business with him. Says the Gemara, Tanur Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Goy ha'hoylech liyarid. Now they used to have, let's say it's a Goyish holiday, and everybody goes to serve the avodah zarah, in the church in the city. So then they would also make a market day that day, because there's a lot of people there. Not everybody that's in the market is going to do avodah zarah. So the Brisa says, Tanur Rabbanan, Goy ha'hoylech liyarid, A goy is going to the marketplace on the day that people are serving their avodah zarah, bein bahalicha, bein bechazara muta. Whether he's on his way to the marketplace or whether he's on the return, muta, you're allowed to do business with him. You're allowed to change money with him. Yisrael, but if a Jew is going to that same marketplace, Bahalich on his way there, mutter, it's mutter. Bechazara on your way back, also you're not allowed to do business with this Jew. Now, the Gemara is going to explain why not. My shno, what is the difference, the Yisrael, the Bechazara Aser? Why is it that a Jew, on his return, you're not permitted to do business with him? He went to the marketplace, he was selling items, he has cash on him. Why can't I sell items? Why can't I do business with him? Because the Amre, we say, Avodah Zarah Zaben. He went to this marketplace to sell, let's say, idols, mini idols, or things for the idols, or Avodah Zarah utensils. So the money that he receives is money that he's not permitted to benefit from. It's money based on him selling Avodah Zarah. So that money that is in his hand, right? That we learned that not only is an Avodah Zarah Asr Bahana, but if I sell the Avodah Zarah, the money becomes Asr Bahana. So this guy who's a Jew tried to make business in the Goyish marketplace. So therefore we assume Avodah Zarah Zaman, he sold Avodah Zarah, the May Avodah Zarah Ikabadeh. So now he has money of Avodah Zarah in his hand. So if you do any type of business and he gives you change, that money is going to be Asr Bahana. So then if that's the case, that's why when he returns from that marketplace, you're not allowed to do business with him, then Goy Nami name it. Let's say the same thing by a Goy. He goes to that marketplace, Avodah Zarah Zavim, let's assume he sold an Avodah Zarah, the May Avodah Zarah Ikabadeh. In his possession is now the money of Avodah Zarah. So therefore, I should not be allowed to do business with a Goy upon his return from that market, from that shuk. Ella, the reason why a Goy you could do, because Goy Aminim, by Goy we say he didn't sell Avodah Zarah pieces. He sold Glima Zaben, he was selling suits, Chamara Zaben, he was selling wine, he was selling permissible items in that market. So therefore his money is permitted. So Yisrael Name, so let's say a Jew also, let us say the Jew snuck into the Goyisha market. Eimer, let us say, he wasn't selling Avodah Zarah pieces. He was selling Glima Zaben. He was selling clothing, Chamara Zaben, wine. So why do we assume that a Yid, when he enters into the Goyish Shuk, he's automatically engaging in selling Avodah Zarah? So the answer is true. If the Jew was selling normal items like a suit or a wine, he would have sold it in the Jewish marketplace. Why does he go to the Goyish marketplace the day that there is a party for Avodah Zarah, the day that they're celebrating an Avodah Zarah day, a holiday? The reason why he's doing that, because he brought probably from the Far East some Avodah Zarah, and he snuck in there to start selling. So we assume that the Yid is selling Goyisha is Avodah Zarah, so the money that he received is also Asar Bahana. A guy, when he goes into the marketplace, he's selling normal items like a suit or a wine. So him, you're allowed to do business with him, whether he's on his way to the market or even on his return. Then we said in the Brisa of Habo'in Matorim, those that are coming back. Let's say the pilgrimage is on his way back from the Avodah Zarah. So we said, then they're back from the pilgrimage, you're allowed to do business with them, because even if they are successful, he's not going to go back to thank his Avodah Zarah. Amar Rab Shimon ben Levi, or Shimon ben Lakish, the only reason why you're allowed to do business is if it's an individual guy who's on his way back from the pilgrimage, you can do business with him, because he's not going to return back to the Avodah Zarah. He's not going to go back. But people who are coming as a group, if you do business with them and they're successful, as a group, they're going to go back and thank their Avodah Zarah. Asurim, because Ema, let us say, Daitai Lachser, they're going to return back to the Avodah Zarah. New Gemara. The Mishnah said that Noidos Hagoyim v'Kankaneim. Noidos is a wineskin of Goyim, or Kankaneim, or a jug made of earthenware. Now we're going to learn something about kashering these vessels that belong to goyim. You see, a goy who uses his vessel for storing wine in there, so even after he empties the wine, a Jew can't put wine in that vessel. Why? Because a little bit of taste or drop of wine that's in the walls of the jug is going to go into the Jewish wine. And we have a rule, a very important rule. Min b'minoi is not bottle. In other words, it's wine, Goyish wine, going into Jewish wine. Even if it's just a drop, it asses the whole Jewish wine. Very important point. So, therefore, how do you kosher? How can a goy make a vessel? I mean, it's not like you could always go into Target and buy new vessels. You sometimes have to use Goyish vessels. So we're dealing here with how do you kosher them so that a Jew can store his wine. So Tanur Rabbanim, the rabbis taught, Noidais HaGoyim, you have wineskins of Goyim. So grudim, if they're stripped from any tar, let's say there's no tar in this, somehow tar was like a sealant inside the wineskin, and the chadoshim, they're new. In other words, the goy put in maybe wine in there, but emptied it right away. So they're relatively new. The goy did not store wine for a long period of time in this wineskin, and it's made of leather. So then it's mutar for a Jew to borrow it and store his own wine in it, because there's nothing in the walls of that wineskin. But yeshanim, but if they're old wineskins, muzu puffin, or they are tarred. So let's say you have a little leather sack, right, which is a wineskin, that it's not old, but they put already tar in it. So even if the guy used it a couple of times and didn't store anything, right away the wine, the goyish wine, is absorbed into the walls, into the leather of this wineskin, and therefore asurin is not permitted for a Jew to put his wine in there. So now the Brisa says something different. Goy ribabem ba'evden. If a guy is like stripping it down and trying to work in to put in tar into a wineskin, okay? So goy ribabem v'ibdan. He's working it away, put tar into a wineskin. V'nasal l'sachin yain, and he put wine in there. It doesn't say who put wine in there. The Yisrael Omer Agambov, and a Jew standing right near the goy. There's no problem. So the Gemara understood that a guy was made and tarred a new wineskin, and then he put his new wine. The guy put his wine in there. If a Jew saw the guy put his wine in there, the Jew can use that wineskin. Says the Gemara, if the guy put his wine into that wineskin, ki Yisrael Omer al Gabav Mayhava. Who cares if a Jew is standing on top and is the mashgiach? The guy is using this, wineskin pouch to put his own wine in there. So now you're going to allow a Jew to put his wine in there, his own wine, Jewish wine in there? Amar Papa explained. This is what the Brisa means to say. The guy tarred up the wine. So he was the manufacturer of this wineskin. It was a talent to do that. I don't know, you went to a specialist. But a Jew could put his own wine into that wineskin, but there has to be another Jew overseeing it. And another Jew watching as this Jew puts his wine in that wineskin, no problem. So the Gemara is asking, why do you need two mashgichim over here? Since the Jew himself is Jew number one is putting his wine into that wineskin that's being manufactured by a goy, so then why does he need another Jew to oversee how he does this? Yisrael Acher Oimed Agabav Lamali. Why does he need that? Another Jew to stand by him. Answers the Gemara, Dilma Agav Tirde Menasech V'Loyadate. The answer is because maybe as the Jew is putting his wine in there, the guy is going to slip in his own wine in there. I don't know why he would do that, but he was going to do that. So there's another Jew overseeing to watch that the guy doesn't put his own wine as the Jew is putting his wine into this brand new manufactured wineskin. Rav Zvid said, The way you learn this brisa is that really it's like you learned in previous. That means the guy put his own wine in there. He manufactured this wineskin and he put his own wine in there. Now, interestingly, he put his own wine not to store it, but to neutralize the acid smell of the tar. So what the Gemara is going to say is that when the guy puts his wine right away as it's being manufactured, he puts wine there to neutralize, that wine disappears forever. It's like you can't bring it out. It never expels itself. So therefore, a Jew could put his own wine in there. So the hacha over here, the idna the koshadale lay. As soon as the guy put his wine in there, it's nasa gzarek mayim latit. When you throw water into cement to make cement, once the water is there, it like evaporates, or somehow it never comes out. So here also, when you put the wine when the guy put the wine into the tar, this tarred wineskin, to neutralize that tar, the tar is going to absorb the wine and make it disappear forever. Omar Rapapi said he wanted to extend it. Shmami, we can see from here, Rav Zvid, the high goy, the shad milcha, the Yisrael shari. If a goy threw wine into let's say, a vessel full of salt that belongs to a Jew, shari, the Jew is permitted to eat that salt. Why? Because the wine will never come out of the salt. So maskev la Rav Hashim idama, you can't compare. Hasam ka'azal ibad. When the wine is thrown onto tar, you'll never see or taste that kind of wine. Hacha like ka'azal ibad. When you put the wine onto salt, true, it's not going to come out, but in the salt you can taste the wine. So that was that. Now, how do you kasher these things? Let's say now we're going to learn how do you kasher these things, and a very fascinating thing. We're familiar with kashering. You throw things into hot water and it becomes, you kasher it. Here, the Gemara is going to say a new way to kasher a vessel of goyish wine, a vessel that the goy put wine. So the Gemara says, Bar Adi Taya, this Bar Adi, this goy, this Arab goy, Anas Haniziki Mirav Yitzchak Bar Yosef. He stole some barrels, let's say, from Yitzchak Bar Yosef. Rama Buhu Chamra, and the guy put his own wine in there, and then he used it. Vadrin in Ninalai, and then returned it to Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef. Asa Shal Midrash. So he asked the question in the Beis Medrash: how do I kasher my barrels? Amalei Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yirmiyah said, "Kach Rabbi Ami halach l'maisa." Rabbi Ami gave you the way to do it. Memalan mayim shlosh yomim u'ma'ara. Basically, you fill the barrel up with water, and then leave it there for 24 hours. Then spill it out. Fill it up again with water, leave it there for 24 hours, spill it out, and do this for 3 days. And Rava explained, Sarach la'aram eis le'eis. You have to leave the water in there for 24 hours and then empty it out. And somehow this cold water will neutralize the wine that's in the walls of the barrel, and now it becomes kosher for a Jew to use it. Now, how does this work? It's a big finish. Because you don't find, let's say, Iroi, let's say, koshering something, I guess. Here by Yayin Nesach, by the vessels of wine, they gave this new idea of just filling it up with water for 3 days and spilling it out every 24 hours and putting in new water. I guess the water being there for 3 days will neutralize any taste of wine in the walls, and therefore a Jew could put his wine in there and not be worried about anything. So they all thought that this hechsher, this hiddush of this type of hechsher is hanimili done, because these barrels originally belonged to Rav Yitzchak Bar Yosef, so they were more absorbed of kosher wine. So therefore, this type of hechsher of kashering the barrel works. If you're buying straight up a barrel belonging to a guy, and he always was storing there non-kosher wine, people thought that it doesn't work, this type of kashering the keli. Whether it's our original barrel and the guy used it, or whether it's their original barrel, this type of kashering called irui for 3 days, it works. This is a type of hechsher that you machsher the kelim of a goy. That would only work. I thought it only works for, let's say, wineskins. If it's leather, then this irui of 3 days works. I about thought aval kakanim, but if you have an earthenware barrel, it wouldn't work. Amalei Ravashi says loishna noidos, loishna kankanim. Doesn't make a difference whether it's noidos or kankanim. It doesn't matter what the barrel is made out of. It's always going to work. This irui of shloisha yamim, this concept of 24 hours, 72 hours of water. Tan Rabbanim, the rabbis taught kankanim shel goyim, chadashim gerudim mutarim. If it's a brand new earthenware flagon and it's new and doesn't have tar in it, and the guy used it a little bit, so mutar it's mutar for a Jew to use because there's nothing absorbed in the wall. Yushanim, if it's old, right? So if you used it there for a very long time, or umuzupapin, here umuzupapin, or it was tarred. So right away, even if the guy uses it for a little bit, it was absorbed into the wall. Asurin, it's also for a Jew to use it, and it's also ba'ana. If a Jew uses it, goyishal taste of wine entered his wine, his kosher wine, and now the Jew's wine, it becomes also bahana. Now, how does you kasher it? So here we know like this: goy nice in the second yain. If the goy used it for wine, so then Yisrael nice in the second yain. Then a Jew could kasher it by putting in the water for 3 days. But here's another way to kasher something: goy nice in the second yain. If the goy put wine in there, Yisrael nice in the second tzur umayrais ve'inachoshes. A yid can use like a brine and fish stew that has such a pungent smell and strong, it could nullify the taste of wine in the walls of the barrel, and that's not a problem. So the Gemara says, so we just introduced Tzir My Rice as a brand new way to kasher. So the Gebaylos, we asked the question in the yeshiva, we go to Ahmed Beis, lechatchila oy diavad. Is this a lechatchila way, or is it an ex post facto way to kasher a wine barrel with this sear, with this fish or brine stew, with this brine or fish stew? Tashma, the Tan Rabbi Zvid Bar Arshaya, the Keich Kankanim in Agoyim, Chadashim, Noisin Zachiyayim, Yishonim Noisin Loitzir, Marais the Chatchila, even the Chatchila, you can use this way to kasher a wine vessel. Boya Mene, Rabbi Yehuda ben Nasi Rabami. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi asked Rabami, what happens if I take a earthenware jug that belonged to a guy, he used it for his wine, I heated it up by sending it back to the furnace, and it turned white. Mao, is that a way to kasher kalim? Amalei, so Rabami answered, Sir Saira, the fish brine burns out the wine in the walls of the jug. Ura loikoshkein, a fire certainly will burn it out. It's menami. That's what we learned. And you returned it to the furnace. Kivan shenashin zifson. If the tar started to come apart, mutarim, then it's heated up enough, and a Jew is permitted to use that kankan. Amar Avashi loitei ma'adenasram. You don't even have to heat it up that the tar starts falling apart. Alafila rafei mirpa becomes loose. Even if it didn't come apart, if it comes softened up a little bit, that's enough to kasher the kankan. Now, kinsa. So let's say kinsa. So if you instead of sending it back to the furnace, what you did was drop a few twigs into the kankan and lit it on fire. So it's heated up on the inside, but not on the outside. Pligi bar of Acharavina. And that is a machlekes Rav Ravina if it's a good way to kasher. Chad Aser, one said that's not permitted. But Chad Shori, and one said it is permitted. The Hilka said the halacha is command Aser. It's not a good way to kasher. Why? Because it's not, because the only way to kasher something if it's heated from the inside and the outside. Ibaylahu. The question is, Ma'olit in the Soicha Shecha. Can I put a wine? The guy used it for his wine. Can I put beer into it? Instead of using it for wine, maybe I can store beer into it. And now, even if the taste of wine goes into beer, I would say it's min b'minoi, min shaloi b'minoi. It's not the same type, so it becomes batal. But the question is, maybe I will make a gezerah that if you allowed people to put beer into that kankan, they're going to come to put wine into that kankam belonging to the guy without kashering it. So Rav Nachman, Rav Yehuda Asre, Rav Nachman, Rav Yehuda Asad, V'Rav Ashari, Rav says it's permitted. You can't use it for wine, but you're permitted to use it for beer. So Ravina Shara Rav Chia Bered Rav Yitzchak. Ravina gave permission for Rav Chia Bered Rav Yitzchak to use this goyish kankam lemirma beishichra to put beer in there. Also Rami Bechamra, but by accident Rav Chia Bered Rav Yitzchak used it for wine. So Ravina didn't care for that mistake. He said Rav Chia made the mistake, but still my psak holds true. Not everybody's going to make that kind of mistake. That was just a mishap. But normally, if you tell people that you could only use it for beer, they're not going to use it for wine. Says the Gemara a few more things, another 2 minutes, and then we'll stop. Yitzchak bar Bisna, Hava money de Pakasna. He male maya and b'shim pake. He had these kalim that belonged to a guy, right? He had these kalim belonging to a guy. So he wanted to do the irui, but he was nervous about this filling it up with water. So what he did was he filled it up with water for 3 days and kept it in the sun. And pake and the vessels broke apart from the heat of the sun. Now he didn't have to do that. You caused your own loss. What did the Rabbanim say? Mimali maya, to fill it up with water for 3 days. Anuchin b'shimcha, to put it in the sun, to heat it up. You want to be machmir like that? Mi amar, so you deserve that. That's not the kashering is with the 3 days leaving it in the water. Amar Rav Yusna, Amar Abami, kli neser, ein tahara ba'oilamas. If you're using a kli neser, then you can never kasher it. So my kli neser, what is a kli neser? Amar Rabbi Yosef bar Oven, kli machparer shel tzrif. It's a keli made from mining alum. I don't know what this is, but it's a type of keli that it's hard to kasher it. Says the Gemara, the Beiparzik Rafila, this guy called Beiparzik from Rafila, Anas Haikuvi Pumbedisa. He stole cups from Pumbedisa. Rama Beichamer, he put in wine in there. Now, he stole wine glasses and then puts wine in there, adrenaline, and then the guy returned it back to the Jews. Also, Shaila Rav Yehuda. So they asked Rav Yehuda, do they need to kasher these cups? Amar, he said, a new thing. Anything that the guy didn't use to store wine, but he just used it temporarily, then the walls of that thing, of the vessel, did not absorb the wine. So all you got to do is just, rinse it out, wash it out with water, and you're permitted. Amar Ravavira said, this red type of darmoy, this red clay vessel, the barrel of vessel from a voyu, it's a special place. They don't absorb at all. So now you're learning the opposite. Some, even if they put wine there for a long time, this vessel doesn't absorb at all. So all you could do is wash it out with water, and it's muta. Concludes the Gemara. Amar Papi Hani Pasvasa de Beimichse. This place, keli from Beis Michse, came into like Bali Tuve. Since it's also a type of vessel that doesn't absorb, you wash it in water, mutarim. It's almost like glass. Guy puts wine into a wine glass, you could use it because it's not absorbed into the glass. Kaset, regular cups, Ravasi, also Rav Ashi Shari. Ravasi says it's also, and Ravashi says it's permitted. Now, Ishasaba Goy Parmish, if the guy was the first one to use this cup, the cup, Kuli Almi like Pligi Asar. Of course it's Asar, because the Goyish wine went into the walls of the cup. Ki Pligi B'Pam Sheni. If the guy was the second person to use it, it was originally used for kosher wine, and the guy used it for a second time, once already had absorbed kosher wine. So even if the guy is going to use it for non-kosher wine, according to one, the cups are still remain permitted. Iki the Ami, others say, the Parmisha V'Sheni Kim La'amal Pligi D'Aser. If the guy was the first or the second person to use that cup is Aser. Ki Pligi B'Pam Gimel. The argument is, if the guy was the third person to use it, that means the first 2 times this cup was used by a Jew, and the third time was used by a guy. One says it's permitted because it's already full of Jewish wine, and the other said no, the guy's wine can be absorbed in the wall. The Hilka said, halach is, Pamrisha Misheni Asa. If the guy used the cup for the first 2 times, it's Asa. Gimel, if it's the third one to use it, then it's Mutter. Okay, we'll stop over here.